Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy. We've got a spicy show for you here today because this is going to be a fun one. It all starts at the very top with Draft Buzz. Ben Fennell, Dane, Brugler, and I talk about some guys we've studied lately. We're going to break down some film on this safety class as well. And we have one of my favorite discussions that we do every year here on this show. Right around this time, we're going to talk about some guys who are going to be day 2 or day 3 picks that remind us of guys that are rumored to go on day 1. So we'll do all of that in Draft Buzz. After that, we've got On the Clock, where the three of us stick around. We're going to put our GM hats on and pick for 3 random teams. So if you're a fan of the Cowboys, the Cardinals, the Packers, well, this is your week because the randomizer picked those 3 squads, and me and the guys are going to just try and play matchmaker for those teams during different parts of the draft. And then speaking of matchmaker, on the blueprint this week, we're going to welcome in a guy that is going to do just that for the Miami Dolphins, because I'm going to bring on my friend Alain Poupart, who has covered the Miami Dolphins for a long, long time. And Alain is going to jump into the show to talk about the Dolphins and the kinds of players that they like most in the NFL draft. Who they're going to like more? Devante Smith from Alabama, Jamar Chase from LSU. I know a lot of fan bases that are wondering that same question. We'll get into that right there in that part of the show. Then we'll wrap things up with our draft mailbag. We've got a question from one of our listeners that spurs a really interesting debate, ironically enough, about the wide receiver value in this draft. We're going to wrap the show up with that one. Now, before we get started with the show, just a quick reminder to jump onto our Apple Podcast page and do us that great favor of leaving us a rating, leave us a comment, whether it's a question about the process, if you've got a question about a specific player, you've got a mock draft, you've got player rankings you want us to sort through, really whatever it is, jump on over to our Apple Podcast page, our Stitcher page, really wherever you listen to your podcast, leave a rating, leave a review. It helps throw us some support, makes the show more visible to others that are looking for NFL draft content on their podcast platform. Thanks so much to everybody that has done that lately. That being said, let's get this show rolling. It's time now to welcome in Ben and Dane. It's Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, let's get down to business here as I welcome in my friends Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler. Guys, we're going to talk through the safety class. It's going to be a fun group here to break down. But before we get there, I just had a quick question for you guys. It's kind of an interesting discussion that we have almost on a yearly basis here on this show. And safeties are typically a position that everyone would say, oh, you can wait to take a safety. There's guys on day 3 they're going to start. And to a certain extent, that's true. You can get starting safeties, mid-rounds, late rounds of the draft. But that being said, there are still going to be guys that go up high in the draft. So I want to ask you this question. And this does not have to be about safeties. It could be about any position on the board. Are there some players that you look at as, maybe late day 2 or day 3 type prospects that kind of remind you and check some of the same boxes that some players that are getting that, first round or top 50 type buzz? I feel like last year, one good example of that was Isaiah Simmons coming out of Clemson and Jeremy Chin out of Southern Illinois. Now, Jeremy Chin ends up going, early round 3, not day 3. But I think that's kind of an interesting discussion to have, is who are the guys that kind of check some of those same boxes that you could get a little bit later in the draft. I'll kind of kick things off here just to kind of get the ball rolling. To me, a good example of this would be Wake Forest defensive end Carlos Basham, a guy that I think, most of us assume that he's going to go, if not first round, he's going to go top 50, checks a lot of boxes with his size and his power and his effort, his play strength, his versatility. Look at Chauncey Golson down at Iowa. I think he does a lot of those same things, right? I mean, he's a similar kind of frame kid, high motor, relentless play style, has that power, has that ability to kick inside. So you look at Carlos Basham, Chauncey Golson, maybe not too many differences there in terms of the way they play. Ben, who would be one example for you here?
Well, you know how much I love this conversation every year, because weighing the positional depth and forecasting later in the draft is a big part of making selections, and whether you can find comparable talent in later rounds is the cat and mouse of it all. We all know about Elijah Vera Tucker, USC tackle, probably going to play guard, one of the best zone blocking guards, absolute sniper on the second level. But not a lot of people know about Illinois guard Kendrick Green, who I think has some of the best quickness off the ball, similar type of guard. I want him in a zone scheme, whether inside zone, outside zone stretch, really good quickness. He get up on the second level. He was a first team all Big Ten player at Wyatt Davis. just didn't get the same type of recognition, obviously playing for the University of Illinois and Wyatt Davis, Ohio State. But Vera Tucker, you don't get him in round 1, come back and get Kendrick Green in maybe round 3 or 4.
I like it. And I know this is a guy that, Dane, I know you've done Kendrick Green.
Yeah.
Let's go to your first one here.
Yeah, love Green. He's a really good player. I'm going to say on the offensive line, Tevin Jenkins, player that's easy to like just because he's so unique with his power and the way he can control defenders. A guy on day 3, and this is even later, probably, I don't know, 5th, 6th round maybe. Larry Boreham out of Missouri. A guy who was a fixture at right tackle for the Tigers. He's a massive blocker. He has that mean streak in him where, he can use his power and just lock guys down. Hands are heavy. His anchor is strong. And I think he has just enough athleticism to be at the next level. So if you don't get Tevin Jenkins in the first round, I think if you're looking for a similar style blocker who obviously isn't on the same level as Tevin Jenkins, he's more of a 6th offensive lineman. Larry Boreham could be in that similar style.
It's a great pick, Dane, because he's another guy that I think can play up and down the line, might project a little bit better to guard. Mm-hmm. In 19, had to start at left tackle, left guard, right tackle. So a guy which certainly has that experience. He could kind of envision playing anywhere. He has that type of frame.
All right, well, I'll take us to the running back position here. And one example for me would be Travis Etienne, one of the better big play threats, regardless of position in this draft. And let's go to a guy that I feel like people are kind of forgetting about. And this was one of the big names in the running back position coming into the year, and that's Chuba Hubbard from Oklahoma State. He gets dinged up this year. Obviously did not have the level of production that we had seen from him down at Oklahoma State over the previous 2 seasons. But Hubbard has outstanding speed and might run better than Etienne, who a lot of people think is one of the more explosive players in this class. I think you look at Hubbard, he's going to probably go on day 3, and you would argue that he does a lot of the same things that Etienne does. So I think that's kind of an interesting, hey, if you don't get Etienne, whether if you don't believe in taking a back that high or if you just miss out on him, you can do worse than getting Chuba Hubbard a little bit later.
Yeah, that's a really good pick right there. I feel like a lot of people are forgetting about Hubbard, and it's obviously his home run speed, his track ability, his good size, he has production. I'm going to go on to the defensive side of the ball. 2 safety pairs, which I think are kind of interesting. We know about Hamza Nasruddin, tall, rangy safety out of Florida State, but Trill Williams really looks a lot like him with those long limbs and skinny profile, plays in the slot, plays in the box, tough kid, turnover machine, and kind of a different profile of a nickel safety. We all know about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, his versatile skill set at 6'1", 215, 220. If you don't get him in round 1, come back on day 3, and I think that's where Jacoby Stevens is going to fall. Not nearly as athletic, not nearly as explosive. I got news for you guys. Nobody really is compared to, JOK. But Jacoby Stevens, as far as usage, versatility, general athleticism, very similar type of players that can play all over the defense. So I think he's a really interesting kind of chess piece that's going to be used in a similar mold. Now, I think Owusu-Koramoah, obviously freak show speed and athleticism. That's why he's going, top 30. But Jacoby Stevens, really good player, in my opinion.
Yeah, then Stevens plays better through contact, playing in traffic a little bit better, in my opinion, too.
And a little more size, probably pushing 230, while, JOK is probably right around 215.
Dane, round us out here. What's your last one?
All right, so I couldn't decide which one I was going to go with. I'm just going to do both of them. At corner, Caleb Farley, 6'2", 200 pounds, a speedster. If you don't get him in the top 10, top 12, then in 3rd or 4th round, Robert Rochelle, Central Arkansas. Another guy who, Caleb Farley, quarterback in high school, moves to wide receiver at Virginia Tech, then moves to corner. Robert Rochelle, former wide receiver, making the move to corner, a lean frame. The technique needs work. There's a lot of things that needs cleaned up, but the athleticism, the speed, the length, I mean, that's what you're looking for. That's what you want. And so, if you can't get Caleb Farley early and you're still looking for that style of player, I think Rochelle in the 3rd or 4th would make sense. And then at wide receiver, the undersized receiver, you don't get Tutu Atwell. What about Jalen Darden later on in the draft? Ben, I know you looked at Darden. You liked him as well as a day 3 type of target. He's vastly undersized, and that limits his catch radius and what he's going to do in traffic and things like that. But when you have that type of speed and you're that type of electric playmaker and you can get open and create after the catch, you can find a role, some special teams experience as well. So you miss out on Tutu Atwell on day 2, a player that's probably not going to cost you it's not going to be expensive, probably somewhere in the later rounds. Jalen Darden would be a nice pickup.
Well, that was a perfect transition into our next category here. We're going to go through our film room recap, just a player that we've studied. And Ben, I know that you wanted to do Jalen Darden, so just take us right in. Well, what did you see from Darden on film?
Yeah, let's cover the mean green receiver down there at North Texas, Jalen Darden. It's a kind of an undersized guy at 5'9", 175 pounds, but Dane, was saying shifty, explosive, quick in and out of breaks, and he's got the long home run speed. Really loose, creative yards after catch. He's a dynamic athlete in space, knows how to kind of beat people in a phone booth. He's a vertical threat from the slot. The last 2 seasons, second most yak, second most receiving touchdowns. Only 2. Our Heisman Trophy winner, Devante Smith, pretty good company. Now, Dane threw out there, Jakeem Grant style of player. I love that kind of comp and projection, the way he settled in to the Miami Dolphins coming out of Texas Tech, if I'm not mistaken. I had initially written down Eddie Royal, who's that kind of slot, tough guy that can win, down the field, quick game stuff, returner. Long story short, he's probably going to go on day 3 because of how deep this receiver group is. But if you don't get one of those dynamic slot players early, just like Dane said, whether it's Tutu or whether it's, Elijah Moore or Kadarius Toney, one of those guys, I think Darden's going to be one of those first picks off the board in round 4.
All right. So I have not done Darden yet. And he is one of the, it will go from like a guy who's a deep sleeper a little bit to one of the bigger names in this class. And I just got to the film of Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. And I watched him on Friday. Guys, he's really, really good. And I know it's not breaking news to you guys because you guys have studied him. This is my first look at him. And he checks so many boxes for me. He's a little bit, we'll see what he comes in at from a size standpoint. He's listed 6'1", 195. My guess is he's not quite up to 6'1", but you're talking about a young receiver. He's going to be a 21-year-old rookie. He's an outstanding athlete. He gets to top speed really quick. He's a really easy mover. He snaps off breaks. He can run speed cuts. He can separate. There's no question about that. But then also he's run routes from everywhere on the field. You go back to his sophomore season in 2019. You watch this year, he played more the Michael Pittman role this year where he was to the far left of the formation outside the numbers. But you watch him winning from the slot from both sides. You can watch him from the backfield and you can see all the different ways they were able to use him. His versatility, his ability to go up and win, his ability to win at the top of the route. After the catch, he's really good. Outstanding leaping grabs at all 3 levels of the field. He's really crafty getting off the line. He can beat the jam. He just checks a lot of boxes. And I was, sitting there after watching him, I'm like, who are some players that he kind of reminds me of? And the one name that I wrote down was Tyler Lockett. I feel like he's kind of, maybe we'll see what the measurements are. Lockett came in a little bit smaller and he ran, I think, like low 4.4. So we'll see, if he is able to match that. The one area that Lockett, I feel like, has a little bit of the edge, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong here if you disagree. Lockett was so great. We talked about this all the time watching the Seahawks. He's so great through contact in every phase. He can get off the jam. He can win at the top of the route with play strength and then through contact at the catch point. I don't know that St. Brown is quite to that level in terms of his play strength, but across the board, again, he checks a lot of boxes. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers in this draft.
I don't think he's quite to that level, but I think he's going to have a little bit more size and length to him than Tyler Lockett.
Yep.
And the one thing I hang my hat on with his report, as diverse receiver production as I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Whether that's inside, outside, tight splits, plus splits, in the backfield, gadget stuff, quick game, middle of the field, vertical stuff, winning at the catch point in the red zone. I've kind of been saying it for a few months now. These are all the things Tyler Boyd did at Pitt. And when he, you look at his usage with the Cincinnati Bengals, there's a lot of people in the Cincinnati community that want him used more and not just be this slot receiver and this kind of third down chain mover. He could do so much more. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, has a lot of good football ahead of him. And the other thing, great kid off the field, great family off the field, brother of Equinemius with the Packers, older brother of Osiris at Stanford. We'll be talking about him in a year or two.
Yep.
Is the one of the few concerns I've heard with St. Brown from scouts is this guy was so polished early on, and not only with his game but his body and the way he takes care of himself, just the way they were raised in that family, that they were worried that he might be at or near a ceiling already.
Yeah, as he maxed out. Yep.
Right. What you see, and that's not necessarily a true negative, because the player you have right now is a really good player.
Yep.
But how much better can he get? Even though he is still 21 years old and a young player, he reached his ceiling a lot quicker than we see a lot of receivers do because of the way he was brought up. And so that's something where when you try to stack these receivers, and it's just so tough. There's so many different talented receivers in, the first 3 rounds. That is something that, could be, something that teams will use. It's a really interesting, piece to his puzzle to figure him out. And I'm interested that you use the Tyler Lockett comparison because I don't know. I didn't see a low 4.4 type of speed guy. I saw a guy that's, plenty athletic, but I didn't see a guy that was necessarily going to strike fear in, the mind of defenses with his pure speed.
Yeah, he's definitely quicker than fast. But what stood out to me is that I thought that he got to top speed really quickly and was able to try and get on top of corners fast and kind of put some stress on them vertically. And that's kind of how Lockett is. I don't know that Lockett is viewed as like this pure deep threat either,
right.
But he's got that instant speed where he can threaten people and then try and put them in stressful spots and then do some damage. Dane, who was yours here?
So I went with Robert Jones, Middle Tennessee, who's Senior Bowl guy. I admit, when I initially watched his tape, I was not blown away. Going into the Senior Bowl, I thought he was solid but unspectacular. And then I watched his second half of the season, and all of a sudden I sat up in my seat and okay, this guy's pretty good. And talking to a scout about it, he mentioned how you have to take into account this year with COVID, how that is affecting some of the bigger guys, some of the linemen, not being maybe on campus for regular conditioning. And, COVID is obviously affecting everybody in all walks of life and all aspects of football, but especially the bigger guys, especially the linemen. And Robert Jones he also had a shoulder. He had offseason surgery with a shoulder. He had a bruised foot. So was dealing with different things in the offseason. I think we saw that trickle into the beginning of the year. But you watch his second half film, last few games of the year, I thought he looked, much improved, a lot looser in his movements, a lot more controlled. So, and he's got a really interesting background because he grew up wanting to be Derrick Rose, Michael Jordan in Chicago. The football coaches said, come out to football. He played 8 games of varsity football in high school. Then he goes to JUCO, plays 13 games, and he goes to Middle Tennessee. And he was a 2-year starter at right tackle. So I think he's a guard at the next level. But the violent hands and natural strength, he has the right temperament. I think there's some things he needs to clean up with his lunging and, just requires some more development. But Robert Jones is a really interesting day 3 developmental guard who I think is a little bit better than I initially gave him credit for.
Interesting. He's a guy that I still have to do a little bit more work on. I did a little bit before the Senior Bowl. I'm kind of like where you were before this final watch. So I'll make another run.
Don't be afraid to dip back into that 2019 tape. He played Iowa, Duke, Michigan, Western Kentucky with D'Angelo Malone. So a lot of, premier talent in 2019.
Interesting. I like it. All right. Well, guys, let's get into our safety preview here. And as we do, we usually have a few different categories. And I kind of split this up where we'll talk about some traits and offer some options day 1, day 2, and day 3. So, Dane, we're going to start things off with the most instinctive safety. And I'll let you pick from day 1 or day 2, who's the guy that stands out to you in terms of his instincts and play recognition skills?
I think I'm going to go with Richie Grant here.
Yep.
A player who I think we all like, we all appreciate what he brings to the field. And I don't think he gets enough credit for necessarily how he sees the field. He covers a lot of ground. We know he has the range, but a big reason why he does that is because he recognizes things quickly. I think he plays with urgency. He trusts what he sees and he goes. He doesn't waste time. So I gave Richie Grant the edge here.
Yeah, I would have taken Richie Grant with my pick if you did not select him. But since you did select him, I will go with Trevon Merrick from TCU, a player that a lot of people feel could go in the first round of this draft. 6'2", just over 200 pounds. Won the Jim Thorpe Award as the #1 defensive back in the country this year. It's a college football award. But looking at his overall body of work, this is a guy that can play in the post. He can get over top and make plays. What really stands out to me is his route recognition skills, both from zone and man. I thought that he did a good job of reading reading the quarterback from depth. He broke on throws early, and then he showed the ability to mirror and match versus receivers in man-to-man coverage as well. So this is a competent man coverage player, a competent zone coverage player. His play recognition skills, and then also his range, his athleticism, really kind of give me a lot of faith that he's going to reach his ceiling as a good free safety in the NFL. Ben, take us through day 3. Who's a day 3 guy with those instincts we want to talk about?
I got to say, I'm not sure if you guys have had, a similar type of issue with slotting these guys and just trying to determine safety, nickel player, big nickel, sub package player. I'm kind of lumping in all these middle of the field defenders. It's a big safety world, a big nickel world out there playing 3 safeties. So that's how I'm projecting a lot of these nickels. But anyways, day 3 player, instinct, safety. I love Damar Hamlin from Pitt.
Yeah.
It's a guy with 2,500 snaps, former number 3 corner in the class way back when, I think 2016. He's been on campus for 5-6 years, but experienced player that's converted to safety. Listen, he has some athletic limitations. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the sharpest guy, as being quick-footed. But I feel like he gets himself in positions with his anticipation of routes, anticipation of run action. Just seems like he's always a step ahead of the offense. That puts him in position to make plays. So guy's experience, and he's probably one of these guys that are going to fill in the back end of somebody's roster and be a really good, solid pro for somebody.
I just actually wrapped him up last Thursday, and just grows on you the more you watch. Just a really competitive, instinctive player, checks a lot of boxes, like you said. Let's go to the next category here. Best coverage player. So left it a little bit open-ended here, but best overall coverage player. I'm going to go first here with a day 1 or day 2 pick, and I'm going to go with Oregon safety Javon Holland, who was an absolute ball hawk whenever he's been on the field for Oregon. I believe he was the only player in the country to have at least 4 picks, both in 2018 as a true freshman and in 2019 as a sophomore. He opted out this past fall, so did not play. But this is a guy who played mostly in the slot and showed that man-to-man coverage ability, but also the same instincts from zone that I talked about with Merrick. I just think Holland's ball skills for a safety, he has got rare, unique ball skills. He's a fun player to watch, a guy that can make plays at all 3 levels of the field, and not bad against the run either. But in terms of his ability to play in coverage, I think he gives you the most versatility, because not only do I think he can play deep, but I think he also offers legitimate value playing over the slot, playing over the tight end as well. His versatility, I think, will really serve him well. Ben, who would be your pick here for day 1 or day 2?
Well, I hate to double dip already on only the second superlative here, but coverage. Is that man coverage, underneath zone coverage, matchup, red zone, back end, playing the post? Well, I got a guy that checks all those boxes, and that's dipping right back to Richie Grant from UCF, who I think can come down and guard tight ends. He can guard slots and man coverage. Excellent on the back end. I think he has really loose hips and great eyes to play either half field or play in the post as a single high safety. He checks all the coverage boxes, in my opinion. Just a matter of what scheme, what fit, what are you going to have him play on a down-to-down basis. But instincts, checking boxes, coverage skills, checking boxes, tough player, checking boxes. Richie Grant is a really good safety prospect.
I love it. Well, Dane, let's go with yours. Day 3 guy, that best coverage player.
I'm going to go Jamar Johnson.
Ooh, good one.
A player that I think we all like. Rangy, smooth movement skills, and he makes sure he makes the offense pay for mistakes. He's got 13 interceptions the last 4 years, and that's going. And so he only played 3 years at Indiana. I'm going back to his senior year of high school.
Okay.
Add in what he did there. So a guy that this past year, Indiana only played 8 games. He still had 4 interceptions. So, and he can do something after the interception. He had 1 pick 6 this year. He averaged almost 25 yards per interception return. So he's got that versatile experience across the secondary. He'll play that Husky position they have. He'll play free safety. He'll play a slot corner. So I think he's an instinctive pattern reader. I think he's got the movement skills, and then he's got the finishing skills when the ball's in his orbit. So Johnson's my pick there.
How did you guys, I've wrapped up Johnson late last week. How did you guys feel about his ability to be a true 3-down player in the NFL? Do you feel like that's a ceiling that he can achieve? How long would it take him to get there? Dane, did you kind of have a feeling on how you viewed his overall ceiling moving forward?
I think he can get there. When he wants to be physical, he can get physical.
Yeah.
But he's way too choosy. As a tackler, he'll make business decisions. His run fits are inconsistent. Sometimes he just looks disinterested. So I need to see more disciplined tendencies, especially in the run game. I know what he can do in coverage, but I just need to see more consistency from him. But I mean, again, this is why we're talking about him as a day 3 player and not necessarily a day 1 or day 2 guy.
Yeah, you could see some of that toughness last year when he played more in the slot, tight to the formation. He blitzed here and there. In 2020, he was much more of a back end player, but reminded me a lot of Desmond King. That style player that may not wow you with athleticism, but he's fairly tough. He's versatile. He's a guy that I think doesn't need to come off the field, whether you're going to play him in the post or down in the slot. I think he's going to be a really good football player.
Yeah, I think he was still adjusting to playing from further depth this year. I thought his key and diagnose was just a little bit slow. He kind of got held up on play action and anything going on in the backfield, but he can make a play on the ball, no question about it. Let's go to our best run defender, Ben. I'll let you kick things off. A guy that's a first or a second or day 1 or day 2 talent. Who do you like here in terms of run defense?
Well, that's the key word right there, Fran. He's a day 1 or day 2 talent. I just don't know if he's going to go on day 1 or day 2. And because he's such a good run defender, that's why his body's so beat up. Broken collarbone, shoulder surgery, back injuries. And that's Talanoa Hufanga at USC, which anytime he's on the field, you see that 6'1", 215-pound frame flying around the field, just finishing ball carriers in the run, on the perimeter, shallow crosses. He's got ball skills. He's an excellent box safety. Probably going to be a sub linebacker at the next level if, the medicals all check and he gets there. But because he's such a good run defender, he's taken some wear and tear. And that's the big question with his report is, what are the medicals? When he's on the field, the tape, I think it's pretty damn good. So, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be. I'll stay at a Holiday Inn Express maybe next week and let you know about it. But Hufanga, really good run defender.
Where are you going next week? Yeah, next week. Dane, who do you got?
I'm going to go with Hamza Nasruddin, who's
nice. Yep.
That linebacker safety tweener, hybrid box safety, whatever you want to call him, whatever role you think is ideal for him. The Florida State coaches call him a war daddy. They really like what he brings to the field from a physical and attitude standpoint. He led the team in tackles as a sophomore and a junior. He was ready to bolt after his junior year before that knee injury happened. We only saw him 2 games this past year. But when he was healthy, you see form tackles when he squares up his target. You see a downhill player who feels quickly and powerful at contact. He can force the ball loose. He had 3 forced fumbles in 2019. So this is a super long downhill force player with the moldable physical traits that you're looking for in that type of role.
Guys, what have you heard about where he's going in this draft? Have you guys heard anything in terms of how scouts are viewing him at this point? Obviously, there's a lot that still needs to happen. But Dane, I'll start with you. Have you heard anything? And then Ben, you can follow up if you've got anything.
I mean, when I did mapping out my top 100, I sent it around to different scouts just to get some feedback, what they think. And I think I had Nasruddin like at, I don't know, early 70s maybe. So was that early 3rd round? And they told me that's right around where they saw him. They didn't, that's not something that they quibbled over. Part of that's coming off the knee injury. Hopefully the medicals are clean. With him, we hope to see Nasruddin a lot quicker than we did this past year. I know that it's complicated when you're talking about knee injuries. So hopefully that the medicals are clean, but I still think he's a day 2 player.
Yeah. I think the talent is really, really good. Ben, have you heard anything, one way or the other?
No, not particularly. I wasn't too inspired with his performance down at the Senior Bowl, but I think he has good tape when he's on the field. He's kind of straddling that day 2, day 3 range for me, being around 3 or around 4. So a team can covet him and think they're getting a steal maybe in round 3, and he could be one of the early day 3 darlings for all I know. I think there's a lot of mid-round guys that are kind of clumped up here, which makes the projections and a lot of your mock drafts pretty Swiss cheese.
Yeah, he's a guy I feel as a day 1 talent, but the injury I think kind of meshes with things a little bit. That's why I was interested to get your guys' thoughts. I'm going to go with Jamie Sherwood here as a day 3 player. You look at Auburn, 6'2", 220 pounds, kind of similar to Nasruddin in terms of just a big height, weight, speed athlete. You look at the way that he kind of moves on the field. Impressive player, just very unproductive in coverage. His only interception in his career came last year as a sophomore. Just has not been super productive on the football. That being said, he's been a core special teams player. He's been a good run defender. I feel like he's going to find a role as a backup safety in the NFL, and probably more in terms of that run stuffing mentality. But I love his ability to come downhill and play through contact. He really, really stood out to me in that arena. Let's go to our next superlative here. Let's go. best big play threat. So the guy that can create some big plays for you. Dane, I'll let you kick things off here.
Well, a guy that you already mentioned, Javon Holland, and for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, we've only saw him 2 years at the college level. He opted out this past year, but as a freshman and sophomore, combined for 9 interceptions. He's the first player since Jarius Byrd to lead Oregon in interceptions in back-to-back years. So, with his key and diagnose skills, with his versatility to line up in different alignments, the athlete that he is, and then what he can do when the football is near him. I mean, he can create. So a guy that can do a lot of things for you in terms of being disruptive and creating those turnovers you're looking for.
I'm going to go with another guy who's been a turnover machine over the course of his career, and that's Syracuse safety Andre Cisco. Whether or not he goes on day 2, I think is still up for debate because while he can create some big plays for you, he'll also allow some big plays, whether it's missed tackles or just being a very reactive player in the secondary. I feel like, good quarterbacks, good offensive schemes will be able to take advantage of him and, be able to move him off his spot and then attack the void down the field. He'll give up some big plays. That being said, he plays the ball really, really well in the air. He is a fluid athlete. He's got great sideline to sideline range. He is coming off a torn ACL. He tore his ACL last, October. So this is a guy that's going to, need a little bit of time to rehab, but a turnover machine for sure on the back end. Ben, who would be yours on day 3 to highlight?
Well, I'll stick right there with the orange and stay with Trill Williams, the nickel safety player, former corner. This guy's similar to Andre Cisco in that he's going to make some big plays for you and break your heart on some other plays or miss some tackles or have some eye violations. But he has 4 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles in his short 2.5-year career. This is a guy that gets the ball back for the offense, just like Cisco. He's a tall, long, rangy player. He plays with this my ball approach, which you see it out there. But he's a bit of a gambler, a bit of, an undisciplined player. I think he has still some developmental, ways to go in converting to a middle of the field player as opposed to being a former corner. But he's 6'2", 195 pounds. He's tall. He's long. He's a good looking player.
So let's get to our next superlative here. And that's a guy that we feel that you are higher on than most. And I'll start things off. I'm going to go with Texas safety Caden Stearns, a guy that was kind of put into the national spotlight as a freshman. He had a huge year back in 2018, was first team all conference, had 4 picks. Then he gets hurt in 2019. He was never really full strength and came back this year. Had a solid season. It wasn't a great season from a production standpoint, but watching the film, I just thought he was a really reliable player. He's 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. He had a couple missed tackles, but a lot of the missed tackles were kind of going sideline to sideline, attacking defenders from the side laterally, as opposed to coming downhill. I thought he ran the alley really well. I thought he filled the run game very well in the tackle box. So I think when you look at overall his skill set, I think he projects pretty well as a free safety. He's not a guy that I want playing in space over a slot receiver or even against an uber athletic tight end. But I thought he was really instinctive. I thought he was tough. And to me, like Ben, you and I have had this conversation off camera before. The way that offenses are operating right now in the NFL with all the eye candy, with all the motion, with all the backfield action, I want my guys, especially right up the middle at linebacker and safety, give me the player versus the prospect. Give me the guy who sees things quickly, who, his mind is going a million miles a minute and he's able to process what's happening in front of him. Maybe he's a step slow in terms of the 40 time and the jumps and everything, but he sees things fast and he can get where he needs to be. A guy I wrote down like Jordan Fuller for Ohio State last year, I wasn't a big fan of because there were athletic limitations, but this is a guy that was a very experienced player, battle tested, instinctive. He's tough. He's competitive. I kind of look at Caden Stearns in a similar light. So he would be a guy that I would say I'm a little bit higher on than most. Ben, I'll come to you. Who's the guy that you feel that you're higher on than most?
Yeah, and I just absolutely love that sentiment because we've seen a number of 4-4 players with no instincts, don't take proper angles, and you don't use that elite speed. So you have to be able to use that in combination with having that good first step and knowing what you're looking at. But I'm wondering if this kid out of, Shreveport? Yeah, Shreveport, Louisiana, a couple years ago. I wonder if he ended up going to LSU, if we'd be talking about him just a little bit differently. At the last second, he went to TCU. Who are we talking about? That's our Darius Washington. Very productive player. He's only a redshirt sophomore, only played 2 years, but he's a really interesting player. And everybody says the size. He's 5'8", 179 pounds. Listen, he doesn't have a lot of size. but he plays very, very strong. He is a feisty, physical player. He packs a punch on contact, really good tackler, great range on the back end, knows how to read the quarterback's eyes, whether he's in the post or the half field, can come down and take away the nickel. Last year, he had 5 picks and 2 PBUs, was on the freak list this past year for all sorts of weightlifting metrics, squatting, benching, cleaning. Not sure if he has the long speed, but I think he plays much tougher than his frame would suggest. Reminds me a lot of maybe a Captain Munnerlyn style of role, or maybe a Tim Jennings. But I just wonder if he was at LSU, won a national championship last year, would we be talking about him as maybe a top 50 consensus player? Similar player to maybe a Kerry Vincent, not without the track speed at LSU, but Ardarius Washington is a really good player.
I wrote down Devante Casey, and Casey was a really productive corner at San Diego State who made the move to safety nickel. And I feel like Washington just kind of ahead of where he's at. He's got great ball skills, and I agree with the size issues, but also the competitiveness and play speed. Dane, let's go to you.
Real quick, would either of you feel comfortable drafting him top 100? Or do you think he's like an early day? To me, I grade him with a 4th round grade. So I once we get to day 3, I would feel comfortable drafting him and overlooking the size and just, because all the positives that you mentioned. But would either of you guys feel comfortable on day 2?
Yeah, my guess is I would feel a little bit more comfortable in terms of how I have him stacked too. I would say he's probably more of an early day 3 guy.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. For my guy that I feel like I'm a little bit higher on, I went with Richard Lecount from Georgia, who is kind of the forgotten safety in this group. Got banged up towards the end of last season. He was in a traffic accident. He was on a dirt bike, and as long as the medicals are okay, which is kind of up in the air right now. He was able to get on the field in the bowl game for the last play, which kind of speaks to his how much he means to that, or meant to that defense, and how much it meant to him to finish strong. But in terms of him being fully healthy, we don't know all the details just yet. But when he's on the field, I mean, you see pursuit range, you see decisiveness, you see him competing with this fearless mentality. The play speed, the energy are outstanding. He could be inconsistent at times, there's no doubt. But he's got potential starting traits as that nickel player, or maybe like an undersized version of a Marquise Blair. That was the first name that kind of came to my mind. So Lecount's a guy who was productive in college. He had 8 interceptions. I think he's just kind of been forgotten because of the injury stuff. So we'll wait and see what the verdict is on the medicals. But if he's healthy, if he's returns to form, I think he's got some starting potential.
All right, let's kind of reach into our bag of tricks here, and let's pick a sleeper, a guy on day 3 that we feel has the ability to be a starter or an impact role player. Ben, I'll come to you first. Who's a sleeper?
I'm going to go out there to the Mountain West, where we don't talk nearly enough about because they put players in the NFL every year. Tariq Thompson, San Diego State, nickel slot defender, safety, 4-year starter, 47 games played, 3,000 snaps. Listen to this production: 12 picks, 17 PBUs, 7 forced fumbles, 3 penalties in 3,000 snaps as a middle of the field player. That's absurd, in my opinion. Good special teams, first team All Mountain West. In fact, the first player in school history to get a postseason honor 4 years in a row. He's a really good player, productive player, tough player that I'm not seeing any buzz on. I'm glad they at least got one of those San Diego State players down to the Senior Bowl in Darren Hall. Yep. But Tariq Thompson's a really good player in that secondary. Do not sleep on this kid. I think he's going to be a darling of the draft. And if he ends up going in the 3rd or the 4th round, I'm telling you, a team saw his tape and fell in love with him.
I was going to say that you were really pounding the table for him to get that Senior Bowl invite. You were happy, though, that Darren Hall at least got the call up. Dane, let's come to you for your sleeper.
I'm going with Christian Uphoff, safety out of Illinois State, who, he's got a little bit of that Nasruddin size-wise. I mean, he is at the Senior Bowl. He came in at 6'2.5", 213 pounds. This is a big kid, and I'm told he's going to run in the 4.5s, maybe even better. Like, he's got that type of speed. So I think first off, you're drafting him and feeling really good about what he's going to bring on special teams from the get-go. And then from there, you try to develop the rest. He's a guy that, looks the part. He runs well. The field, he's very field fast. He needs to develop his keys, what he's seeing out there, his ball awareness. just needs to come along. But again, we're talking about a late round pick that you're drafting to play special teams, and that you can maybe develop and get something else out of him besides just that.
I like it. I'm going to go with another guy who was down at the Senior Bowl, actually. Up-Off was down there. So was Shawn Davis from Florida. And, he comes from the SEC. He's not going to be viewed as a sleeper, but a guy that we're not really discussing. And to me, I like him for a lot of the same reasons I like Stearns. He's not going to be this sexy 4.4 athlete. He's not going to be a guy that is going to burn up the track. But, when you watch him close distance, whether he's playing sideline to sideline or running the alley, he gets from A to B as fast as he needs to. And he's a really reliable tackler. He could finish at the catch point. I wrote down Trey Boston, and I looked at Boston kind of a similar way in that, wasn't a high round draft pick, but just a really reliable player who Carolina has not been able to unseat for years and years and years as a starter. I kind of view Shawn Davis as a similar kind of player. I'm sure he's going to go day 3, and I'm sure he's probably going to find a role as if he's not a starter, one of the top reserves for a team's defensive back room at the free safety spot. Last one, guys. Let's do some player comps. Dane, I'll come to you first. You kick us off here for a player comp.
So I'm going to go with Trevon Merrick, and I'm going to compare him to Jesse Bates. Coming out of Wake Forest, what he has brought to the Cincinnati Bengals as that tall, long, ball hawking safety. There might be a few things in run support they both can get better at. But if you're looking for the guy with range, with true center field skills, with a similar body type, similar athletic profile, there's a lot of similarities between Merrick and Jesse Bates and what they bring to the field.
There are. I like that one. I'm going to go with a guy that plays the opposite kind of role. I feel like Divine Diablo from Virginia Tech. He is going to be doing the complete opposite of whatever Merrick's doing. Keep him away from space. Let him get down and play close to the line of scrimmage. That's where Diablo is. And maybe he's a linebacker when it's all said and done, but a guy that has found a role as a backup box safety that I feel like Diablo kind of compares to from a size standpoint. Rashad Jenkins, when he was coming out of Miami, he goes to the Chargers. He's been a backup. He's played a decent amount because of some of the injuries they've had in that secondary. But Diablo and Jenkins, I think, are very, very similar in terms of their height, weight, speed element of their game. Ben, wrap us up here. What's the last player comp for us?
Well, let's knock out both these UCF safety nickel prospects and Richie Grant, Aaron Robinson. Richie Grant, I'm stealing it from you, Fran. Quandre Diggs. I think you said that in the fall. Absolutely love that. He's a missile in a linear fashion. He's tough. He could play high. He could play low. He can cover. And then Aaron Robinson reminds me a lot of Antrell Roll, especially his time with the Giants and the Cardinals, just maybe without the rocked up biceps that Roll had, but a versatile player that's good over the middle of the field, can take away the nickel, good blitzer, run support. Richie Grant, Aaron Robinson, 2 really good players. And before we turn the page here, who didn't we cover? Who are the names left out there and kind of just floating around? Maybe Paris Ford, Kerry Vincent. Do you guys include Elijah Molden in this conversation, who has played some half field and has played some back end stuff? Obviously, we project him as a nickel player at the next level. Who are the low-hanging fruit names that we didn't touch on?
Well, we didn't mention Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and I feel like at least 2 of the 3 of us view him as a safety. Dane, I don't want to speak for you. I know Ben and I do, but we didn't talk about JOK.
Yeah, I mean, I stay away from the is he a linebacker or a safety argument because he's a rover. You can use him in both spots depending on the personnel and the situation. So I have no problem listing him as a safety, no problem listing as a linebacker. That's fair. The highest graded safety in my rankings that we did not talk about was Gillespie out of Missouri.
Yeah, neither Missouri.
Good call.
We didn't do Bledsoe either. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Shaun Wade, is he a safety?
Right.
Another player, and then James Wiggins, who I considered instead of Lecount as another guy that with some injury issues, who's kind of being overlooked because of that, but still a really good player.
And then 2019 Rose Bowl MVP, Brady Breeze. Where do you stack him up, Brady Breeze?
Did he opt out, or was that Nick Pickett who opted out this year?
I can't keep up. I think they
all opted out. Yeah. Okay. I think the entire secondary, except for Lenore, opted out.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation there with the Oregon DBs in this draft. Well, guys, let's do a little bit of picking here, some little role play for some 3 general managers. Let's go on the clock.
On the clock.
All right, well, let's get things going here. And what has now become one of our listeners' favorite segments on a weekly basis. We're going to go on the clock, and where we pick 3 random teams. And Dane, you're going to kick us off here. The randomizer picked the Dallas Cowboys for you, which you've done. Okay. You spent a lot of time covering the Cowboys for years and years. So this should be interesting. You are going to be Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Will McClay here, looking for a tight end in round 3. So I'll let you kind of lay out what you're looking for. What are some of the specifics that you want to lay out for me? I will play the role of scouting staff. Ben will play the role of the coaching staff. Dane, you can take it away here.
Okay, so first and foremost, I want someone that's going to impact our team from day one. I'm not interested in a guy that's going to maybe one day be a starter for us. This is a win now team. I want a guy that's going to be competing from the get go. I want a guy that can block, but more importantly, is going to be a threat in the passing game down the field. We have a tight end depth chart right now with some solid options. Blake Jarwin's coming off the injury, strong player, especially in the red zone. Dalton Schultz, he's steadily gotten better. But can we find somebody in the 3rd round who's going to be a potential upgrade there for us than what we already have?
So I will play the role of the scouting staff here. And first, just looking at a valuation standpoint, I think it'll probably be a pipe dream to expect that Brevin Jordan will be there. If he is, I feel like that's a slam dunk. He's the guy that can impact the passing game at an extremely high level. They're really only second to Kyle Pitts in this class. So if he's there, let's run the card in. But outside of that, let's talk through 2 names. And I think it's really 2 names up for discussion here from my standpoint. It's Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame, and it's Hunter Long from Boston College. With Tremble, I think, look, this is a team that prioritizes toughness with the way that we collect talent, with what they've done really since Will McClay has been instituted into his most recent role. We value toughness. We value versatility. Tommy Tremble has both of those in spades. The only thing is, he's a little bit more of a project. He's a younger player, less production. He is a good athlete. He can get up to the 2nd and 3rd level. He's a long strider in space, and he can make plays in the passing game. He just hasn't really done it. So there's a little bit more projection there with Tommy Tremble. With Hunter Long from Boston College, we've seen him do it over the last 2 years. He's been the leading receiver for 2 different schemes up there at BC. This year, they opened it up. It was much more wide open, and he did a lot of different things in the passing game, whether it was catch and run stuff in the quick game, whether he was making plays in the intermediate area, even down the seam vertically. He was able to make plays on the football. And last year in 2019, he was an all-conference player, mainly because of his role as a blocker. So this is a guy that's got a versatile skill set for us. And oh, by the way, Coach, and I'm looking at you, Ben, Mike McCarthy. I mean, look, you have a great relationship with Frank Cignetti. He was your quarterback's coach during your last year with the Packers. He is now Hunter Long's offensive coordinator. So we can get some good information. Maybe you can share some info for us, but that would be a connection to look at. And then, by the way, Dane, if we're going to wait till day 3, 2 guys that got Cowboys connections here. Tony Poljan, the tight end from Virginia, he was previously at Central Michigan. That's where our quarterbacks coach, Doug Nussmeier, was. He was there on staff when they recruited and played Tony Poljan early in his career.
Poljan was a quarterback, so yeah, he's got intimate knowledge of being in that quarterback room. That
would be a name to consider, not for round 3, but maybe we get into day 3, and then you know how we love our Boise State guys. So John Bates certainly in play for us. But I think, to me, Brevin Jordan's the pipe dream. Tommy Tremble and Hunter Long, those would be the 2 names I would submit here for us for round 3.
Well, here representing Mike McCarthy, I need to get more athletic at this position. I feel like Dallas tight ends have not had this athleticism at the Y or the U position. I'm looking for that Jermichael Finley back in my offense. I want a yak threat, a mismatch, a versatile blocker. I think Brevin Jordan would be ideal. But in round 3, I'm just not sure we're going to get him. I had Hunter Long written down next. We played too much 11 personnel last year, 6th most in the NFL. I want more 2 tight end sets. Want to know, Fran, your scouting report on a Trey McKitty. If you feel like in round 3, is that too rich for a projected kind of developmental upside guy?
Me personally, I feel like that is a little bit too rich. And also going back to the Tommy Tremble thing, it's a lot of projection. We just haven't seen him do it. Has not been super productive over the course of his career.
I don't think Tremble's given us enough juice in the pass game that the roles he's going to occupy in our offense, I feel like we could get done with Blake Jarwin and some of the lesser, maybe even a fullback convert to do some of that halfback stuff. I want more of that, U tight end playing in the wing with a little bit more of a vertical stretch and yak threat. So, Brevin Jordan's good. I think Hunter Long might be the safest pick here and may be able to carve out that true Y role and let us be a little more 11 personnel with a pass catching tight end.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys sold me. Not on Hunter Long, but on Brevin Jordan, because you both let off on him. So we're going to take a 5th round pick. We're trading up 10 spots. We're picking like 10th in the 3rd round. So we're going to trade up to the first pick in the 3rd round, snagging Brevin Jordan, and there's our athletic tight end. Boom, done.
There we go. Perfect. All right. I like it.
I'm Jerry. I can do what I want.
Yeah, you do whatever you want. Exactly. We got to mortgage future picks. We're doing that. All right, guys, let's go to the next one here. Ben, just so happens that the randomizer picked a team that you have very intimate knowledge of, and that is the Green Bay Packers. So you got the Green Bay Packers late day 3 middle linebacker. New defensive scheme here. So I'm interested to get your thoughts here. Ben, you as Brian Gutekunst, who are you looking for as a middle linebacker on day 3?
Yeah, new defensive scheme with Joe Barry coming over, but I envision it's going to be similar structurally, zone coverage, conservative approach. These inside linebackers, they're going to be early down players, and then you want to get them off the field as soon as possible. Get our sub package nickel and dime out there. So I need guys with good lateral range, downhill trigger in the run game, good intelligence, quarterback of the defense. If we're investing on this, Mike, I need someone to be the quarterback, never come off the field. We had 3 different linebackers wear the green dot last year for a variety of reasons. I want more stability at that position. Then the coverage instincts have to be better than the ability. So I need you to be aware against screens, against play action. We're not a matchup team. We're not going to have you outside the numbers against tight ends. We'll have Amos do that or one of our other sub-package safeties. You're not really a turn and run guy down the seam. So, we want to get our safeties in those roles. So I need him just to be an aware player underneath, eyes on the quarterback, maybe a good blitzer, make more impact plays on the ball, finish ball carriers, get the ball back, give me a fumble or 2. So I need a guy that's productive moving forward as opposed to moving back.
All right. So Dane is playing the role of the scouting staff here.
And a few names immediately popped to my mind, and looking at our board, maybe a KJ Britt from Auburn. We're talking late day 3. So, there's some flawed prospects in the group. Tuff Borland, Ohio State, Riley Cole, South Alabama. But I tell you what, the name that really came to mind immediately, looking at this was Northwestern's Patty Fisher. The instincts, the football IQ already on an NFL level. He's got quick eyes. He can play fast. He stays ahead of schedule. Plays really physical at contact. And if you need proof, how about 11 forced fumbles in his career? This guy was basically Pat Fitzgerald out there for the Wildcats. And so, he doesn't have that twitch to turn and run, but he can sniff out underneath stuff. He had at least 1 interception each of his 4 years in college. So he's a Texas kid, but obviously played in Chicago in that cold and that wind for 4 years. So we know he's going to be fine in Lambeau. 6th round, 7th round. This is the type of player I think fits our culture and fits what we're looking for on defense.
So me as the coaching staff, I do have a question to our scouts. Dane, do you feel that KJ Britt could last that long? Do you feel like he's a guy that is a sure lock for late day 3?
I think so, because he's specialized as a run defender. I think he has a downhill thumper. He's a guy that's going to bring the juice. But how many teams are willing to draft that in the first 5 rounds? I don't know. Those are going to be too many. So I think there's a good chance he'll still be available for us if we're talking 6th or 7th round.
So to me, he was the first name I wanted to bring up. Number one, I think he checks a lot of the boxes that we're looking for, Ben. He's got a really quick trigger downhill. Really stood out to me in their biggest games. When Auburn played LSU during their national title game, you couldn't help but walk away thinking, man, who is this linebacker 33 in the middle of this Auburn defense? He's really, really fast at attacking downhill. He's got good play strength. He's a below average athlete, and that's going to be the concern. But as you mentioned, this is a guy, we want a field general. We want a guy that gets his teammates lined up, very tough, very physical kid, plays with a ton of fire. He's played through injury before. This is the kind of player we're trying to bring in. And I would look at him. Then the other guy I would look at would be Tuff Borland, right from our own backyard. This is a guy that's been a 3-year captain for the Buckeyes, constantly playing with high-speed internet mentally. And he's going to have some of those athletic limitations for sure. 6 foot, 239 pounds. So he's got more of that squatty build. But if we're looking for a guy that can get everybody lined up, that can call the defense, I don't know that there's a lot of better options for us in late day 3, this stage of the draft, than Tuff Borland.
How'd you guys feel about Patty Fisher's performance down in Mobile?
I thought personally that he struggled. I didn't think that he had a great week. Dane, I'm not sure if you saw any.
Did they ask him to do some fish out of water stuff and things that maybe are a little unconventional?
They did, and I would say that it was met with mixed results.
Yeah, it was up and down. But honestly, I thought it was the same thing for really a lot of these linebackers. Tuff Borland, same thing.
Yep.
And I don't know that any of the day 3 linebackers necessarily stood out in a overly positive. At least the linebackers we've been talking about in terms of their Senior Bowl performance.
I think the difference with Patty Fisher is that he's just got the size that these other guys don't, right? I mean, he's built a little bit differently than Borland and Britt.
Yeah, I think you sold me on Patty Fisher there. I think I'm going to have him in a little bit more of a phone booth type of scheme where I don't need him to turn and run. I love his size, his play strength on contact. He obviously can, impose his will when he gets there with all those forced fumbles, which we just need more impact plays on the ball. He's a smart player, and he's only a bus ticket away coming from Northwestern there. All those outdoor games in the Big Ten, you can just envision him fitting in that NFC North and the green and gold. So that's a really good player there in Patty Fisher. I think if we could find him in round 6, maybe even round 7, I think that's a great fit.
All right, well, let's go to the next one here, and I will be up as Steve Keim for the Arizona Cardinals, who made waves with their signing of J.J. Watt early this week. The Cardinals, round 2, outside wide receiver, and me playing the role of Steve Keim. Let me just lay out a couple of ground rules for us. I would love the ability to be able to slide Christian Kirk inside more often in 4 receiver sets. Remember, we led the NFL last year by a wide margin in 4 receiver sets. So I'd love the versatility to be able to move Kirk inside more. So this would be a guy that I really like outside the numbers. Age does matter to me. Of our 16 day 2 picks since I've been the general manager, 11 of them have been 21 or 22 years old. We really like younger prospects. I don't need great athleticism, but I do like some guys with some giddy up. I want some straight line speed, some verticality in this offense. And the other big thing, I do love position versatility. Guys that can do a lot of different things, wear some different hats, and that goes offense and defense. But since we're talking outside receiver, I do want to mention that versatility. So, Ben, you were playing the role of the scouting staff. Dane, you were playing role of the coaching staff. Ben, you can kick things off.
I have a couple names written here with a little bit more length to kind of complement Christian Kirk and maybe play on the other side of DeAndre Hopkins. My question in 2021 is if we're willing to be a little bit more flexible with our scheme and not be so air raid where DeAndre Hopkins lined up left receiver 99% of the time. I just want to get a little bit more versatility with our alignments. So one of the more versatile players, round 2 receiver, I think that's Amon-Ra St. Brown country, or a guy that can win in the slot. He can win on the outside, win down the field, a quick game. You want to put him in the backfield, he could do that too. Maybe even Rashad Bateman. I think round 2, day 2 for Rashad Bateman is right in that ballpark. A guy that can win inside, outside, maybe not a blazer, maybe not the most imposing vertical threat, although he did lead the Big Ten in 2019 in downfield receptions. But he's a guy that knows how to get himself open, may fit the profile a bit of a more of a possession receiver. But I think Kyler Murray really needs that, particularly on 3rd down. Someone that's a technician. Another name in here that's round 2 ballpark, Terrace Marshall is kind of lost, in my opinion, in the pecking order of where he goes. Everybody's coveting these small gadget slot receivers or the mismatch guys with a really good size. He's kind of floating there in no man's land. But he's a really good height, weight, speed guy that can win at the catch point. I think he's an absolute blazer. He's good down in the red zone. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashad Bateman, Terrace Marshall, all kind of versatile players that can do a lot of different roles for us.
I like it. All right, well, Dane, take us through the coaching staff.
All right. Well, this is Coach Kingsbury here. And after we move J.J. Watt to tight end, we're going to get that outside receiver. And I tell you what, Marshall's a good player. From what I've seen, he's got that build-up acceleration. He can eat cushion. He can be that basketball big man that we want to see on the outside. So I like that. Another guy that I liked, because we want speed on the outside. We want that vertical speed, field stretchers that are going to draw coverage. And, when we get those one-on-one opportunities deep, that's something we're going to take advantage of. And De'Ami Brown has my attention. He averaged over 20 yards per catch each of the last 2 years at North Carolina, 5 catches to 50 plus yards last year as a junior. Very skilled at double moves, very skilled at tracking the football deep. 10-7-8 100-meter guy in high school. Is he inconsistent in spots? Sure. Yeah. In terms of the drops, the route tree doesn't have a ton of branches, but that's okay. He's only 21 years old. He's getting better. So there's something to this kid.
So to me, and Ben, I'm going to go back to the first name you brought up, and I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the reason why I like this connection is that he's coming from the same branch of offense. Graham Harrell's the offensive coordinator at USC, operates that air raid offense under Mike Leach. So you're going to have that same verbiage. He'll be able to step right in, and it's not going to be as steep a learning curve for him. We're going to get some good intel. I feel like it'll be a nice, easy transition for him coming into our offense. So I'll make Amon-Ra St. Brown the pick.
Well, before you submit that card, let me just put this out there to you. If there's a run on tackles and quarterbacks in round one, as we expect, if a Rondell Moore or Elijah Moore is sitting here in round two, are you still willing to go Amon-Ra St. Brown over those two? I know they don't really fit the profile we're looking for, as those are a little bit smaller slot receivers in that Christian Kirk role. Those are two pretty good receivers if they're sitting there on day two for us.
Yeah, I think I want more. I want guys that definitely have value for us outside the numbers. And I think with what we've seen from St. Brown getting off the jam, I do feel a little bit better about his ability to win on the outside. As with the other guys, I'm a little bit more, especially with Moore, I'm a little bit more concerned about his ability to win outside the numbers.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, this was fun. This was maybe our best one, I feel like. And Dane, I do have a question for you. Did you throw out a little bit of a twang there when you put on your coach's voice? I felt like you've changed personality a little bit there.
I might have practiced it last night. Maybe. I don't know.
Looking in the mirror. All right.
Well, the listeners can't see he spiked his hair and put on shades to fit the whole role there.
Yeah, I mean, you could mistake me for Ryan Gosling, no question.
You didn't have to frost your tips and everything, man. Relax.
Hey,
all right, we're just playing a role.
Don't judge us here. Don't judge.
You got to walk the walk. Well, guys, this was fun. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
All 32 teams are always under construction. How are they being built? Let's check out the blueprint.
Well, I'm excited to welcome in a guy that I've known for a long time, and that is Alain Poupart, who does a great job covering the Miami Dolphins. Alain, thanks so much for joining us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast.
No, my pleasure. Hey, friend, if we can't get together in person in Indy, let's do something over the phone.
Exactly right. This time of year, we would usually be out in Indianapolis. We'd be enjoying a nice meal somewhere. And that, of course, is not happening this year. But here's hoping we'll be able to get together a year from now. We are here today, though, to talk about the Miami Dolphins and some of the things we've seen from them over the years when it comes to their draft strategy. Chris Grier has been the general manager now for a handful of years. He's been with the organization for a long time, came up under Bill Parcells. I believe, if I remember right, that's how he first ended up in Miami. Are there three trends that kind of stand out to you when you look back at Miami's draft history under Chris Grier? Just something for people that are creating mock drafts to just kind of keep in mind. We'll just go one at a time. What would be the first one for you?
Okay, a couple of quick things, if I may. Chris Grier's father, Bobby Grier, was a longtime exec with the Patriots. That's where the Big Parcells connection came in. Chris Grier has actually preceded Bill Parcells in Miami. Actually, he'd been there quite a while before Parcells joined in. Chris Grier has been GM since 2016. When exactly he got pure personnel power, for lack of a better term, is a little bit nebulous. Because when he was hired as GM, the Dolphins had Mike Tannenbaum as Executive Vice President of Football Ops, which certainly suggests that maybe he had some say in player personnel decisions. And then Adam Gase, once he was hired by the Jets, said in a public comment that they gave him authority over the personnel in Miami. So that having been said,
sure.
For the past few years with Chris Grier as GM, a couple of things. One of the trends that stands out is they have pretty much focused on players from the big schools, the so-called FBS schools.
Yep.
Which was a change from 2014 when they had, I believe it was 8 picks, and the first 2 were SEC guys, Jawan James and Jarvis Landry. And then everybody else in the draft, with the exception of one, was somebody from a smaller school. And not that they necessarily panned out. So since then, the last few years, it's been nothing but the big schools. The smallest schools they've gone is Louisiana last year with Robert Hunt in the second round.
If I remember right, Alan, I kind of looked back at it. He's been one of only 18 picks on days 1 and 2 that have gone outside the Power 5. All the other picks, 17 of the other 18 day 2 selections and day 1 selections have been from the Power 5 schools.
Yeah, and they've been very big on the big programs too. The your Clemson, LSU, Alabama, Ohio State. So that's one thing that I think would stand out. Another trend, and it was kind of broken a little bit last year, but before that, they tended to go with seniors, college seniors. Last year, again, like I said, with their three first-round picks, actually, all of them were underclassmen, starting with Tua Tagovailoa, followed by Austin Jackson, and then Noah Benogany with their third first-round pick.
Interesting.
But before that, there's been a focus a little bit on seniors. Beyond that, and then here's a third thing I would throw out there as well is building the lines.
Got it.
There's been a focus on that the past 2 years. Last year, they took 3 offensive linemen in the draft, including Jackson in the first round, Hunt in round 2, and Solomon Kinley, the big guard from Georgia, in round 4. They also took 3 defensive linemen, Raekwon Davis in round 2, Jason Strobridge in round 5, and Curtis Weaver, who didn't pan out, wound up getting cut in training camp, also in round 5. And even the year before that, the first round pick was Christian Wilkins, the defensive tackle from Clemson. So those are 3 things, if you were looking for any kind of sort of trend or model that stand out.
The other thing I know, like going back and just studying Chris Grier as well, obviously you look back at his influences, working obviously with his dad certainly had a big influence on him, but he's got a little bit of Parcells influence, a Nick Saban influence, height, weight, speed, prototype players. And I feel like that's a thing that has always stood out about those guys that have come from that tree, with Saban, with Parcells, has kind of been, all right, we're looking for the bigger, faster, stronger. And then the other big thing, and Brian Flores has talked about this so often, has been the character aspect of it, and the culture builders, those kinds of players. It seems like those things seem to be important to them. Is that something that you've seen being close to the team?
That's fair in terms of the height, weight, size, speed type of issue. Although they broke that rule with their first pick last year with Tua, because Tua was kind of undersized. But you look at the other guys, Igbenogany, while he was raw, has prototypical size speed ratio. Same with Austin Jackson. Like, he's the guy who looks the part, even though he was kind of a little bit raw, and that's what we saw in 2020. And in terms of the leader aspect, absolutely, that stands out. You look at Minkah Fitzpatrick in 2018, even though that didn't pan out in the end. Christian Wilkins was a team leader at Clemson as well. Tua was a guy also with great leadership qualities last year as well. So, that's a fair assessment as well.
The Tua one, you mentioned he broke the underclassmen in terms of they used to trend towards seniors. The other big one too with that, they almost never take the medical red flags. The only times they've taken a medical red flag have been for quarterbacks. It was with Tua, and there was one other guy in my notes. I had to go back and look, but I feel like that Tua in a lot of different ways broke a number of trends for Chris Grier and what he's done in the past.
And the jury's still out on that one as well. If we're going to be honest about it, after year one, didn't have the same kind of splash as either Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert did. But so we'll see what happens moving forward.
All right. So next question for you. Are there any schools that Chris Grier or this coaching staff seem to have special connections to that you feel are important to take into account when people are putting together a mock draft?
Well, the one that jumps out is Alabama, and I don't know if that makes the Dolphins really unique, as a whole lot of teams gravitate towards that school, but they seem to have a good relationship with Nick Saban working down there. I'm guessing that comes through Chris Grier, and two through Brian Flores and the Bill Belichick connection as well. So I think all things being equal, if it's completely 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, they would lean toward the Alabama player, which of course may come into the discussion of the Devante Smith, Jamar Chase debate, though I'm not convinced that it's necessarily a 6 of one, half a dozen type of situation there. But I think all things being equal, that would be a school that they would tend to lean to. And again, as I mentioned before, the other ones are the obvious ones, the big schools. They also have a couple of new coaches, new from a year ago, who came directly from colleges. Gerald Alexander, their secondary coach, came from Cal.
Yep.
That having been said, they could have used a safety last year, and Ashton Davis was there sitting in the 3rd round. I don't remember if they picked Brandon Jones before or after Ashton Davis was off the board. I believe it was after. So how much of a pull that has, who knows? They also hired Anthony Campanelli as linebackers coach last year after he coached at Michigan. Michigan had a couple of linebackers in the draft last year. Dolphins didn't go with either one of them. One of them, Josh Uchi, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, wound up with New England.
Yep.
So those would be logically teams that the Dolphins would gravitate to, again, in the case of everything else being equal, because of the familiarity with those coaches.
Yep, and as I've said numerous times on the show, I feel like that familiarity is going to play a big part in this upcoming draft. Let's talk about this upcoming draft now. What do you feel are 3 big needs for this Miami Dolphins team as we head into the month of March?
If we're going to be honest, as much progress as they made last year, going from 5-11 to 10-6, their roster is still not a finished product. They could use help just about anywhere on the roster, with the only exceptions being cornerback, unless the Xavier Howard situation with his contract goes awry.
Okay.
And tight end, unless they're staring at Kyle Pitts, not at 3, but maybe a little bit later on in the first round, and he's available, and he's such a unique talent, maybe not even a pure tight end that they go there. But outside of that, they could use help anywhere. If you ask me to prioritize the top 3, I think they could use like a pure number 1 running back, which they don't have. They have a lot of solid, decent complementary guys like Myles Gaskin, Salvin Ahmed. Patrick Laird is a good special teams player, not much of a contributor on offense. So that's one of them. I know wide receivers out there. As I wrote this week, their wide receiver core is not nearly as poor and decrepit as everybody makes it out to be, but they don't have a pure number 1 guy if they can't rely on Devontae Parker to stay healthy a whole year, which he's done once in his career, and that was in 2019. The offensive line certainly still could use some reinforcements. They did draft 3 guys last year, and all 3 of them were starters by the end of the year. But there were a lot of growing pains, and it's still a work in progress. They could use another edge rusher, a guy who can win on one of matchups. Emmanuel Ogbah led the team in sacks last year with 9, but he had 1 in the final 7 games. And a lot of the sacks were scheme-based, including this most famous one all year was the one. Well, the most famous one all year was a 28-yard sack of Joe Flacco.
Right.
But he had another one against the Rams that caused a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. But if you look at the replay, basically the Rams kind of moved their protection, slid their protection to the left, and basically Ogbah came in untouched with a free run that Jared Goff nailed him from the blind side. So that's clearly a need. They could use another off-the-ball linebacker to complement Jerome Baker, who had a really good year last year, but they're very thin at that spot. And they could use a safety, particularly because Bobby McCain and Eric Rowe have the kind of cap numbers that would make them susceptible to being cap casualties this offseason.
All right. So a lot of different needs there that you've kind of highlighted potentially, as you said at the top. I mean, they could go a number of different directions. So the next question I always ask, everyone always talks about the discussion of need versus best player available. When you look at this front office, you look at this coaching staff, just how they've built the roster, how do you feel that they will approach this upcoming draft when it comes to need versus best player available? What has been their history in terms of how you've seen it?
It's BPA, and the one pick that really highlights that is the Igbenogany pick last year at number 30, after they traded down from 26 with the Packers. The Dolphins, even heading into last year, into the last draft, I should say, were pretty set at cornerback after signing Byron Jones in free agency.
Right.
To complement, to play opposite Xavier Howard, and they had Nick Needham as an up-and-coming guy. So cornerback clearly was down the line in terms of priorities last year, and that's who they took because they really liked the guy's upside. So I think there's your answer right there, and I think that would apply at every position, which is why, because technically they don't need a tight end because they have Mike Gesicki, Durham Smythe, and Adam Shaheen, who they got from the Bears last year. It's a solid group. There's no Travis Kelce or Darren Waller in the group, but it's a solid group, particularly with Gesicki emerging. But if Kyle Pitts is staring at them at a spot where they feel he's the best guy to take, they'll take him.
So I always wrap this up by kind of bringing up, all right, who are some players that are being mocked to the Dolphins right now that make sense, and who are some guys that don't make sense? I guess before we get there, I want to ask you this question. You brought up the Jamar Chase versus Devante Smith debate. It's a debate that Eagles fans and media surrounding the Eagles are having that same debate right now. How do you feel that Miami will look at this? Because me looking at it, all the stuff that you kind of laid out, I feel like you could make an argument. You could see a situation where, oh yeah, they would lean towards Smith, or where they would lean towards Chase.
Yeah, and that's a tough one to tell. And getting information and nuggets on how the Dolphins are thinking with this new regime is close to impossible. I know Brian Flores coached the Senior Bowl, and he made some comments about Devante Smith that had some people immediately going, well, that's who they're picking.
That's the pick, yeah.
Well, yeah, you've been in this business long enough to know that if I ask you, Coach Flo, what do you think about Devante Smith? Any concern about his size? What is he going to say?
Right.
Is he really going to say, yeah, he's a little bit too thin for my taste, and I think we might steer away? No, he's going to say it hasn't stopped him from producing big time at Alabama. He's a good player. A good player is a good player. That having said, he certainly doesn't meet the criteria if we're going by the Parcellians philosophy of height-size ratio. He's awfully thin.
Yep.
And he's awfully thin for, especially if the Dolphins pick a wide receiver at number 3, which I personally have a hard time seeing. I'm tempted to believe they're going to try to trade. They're going to try everything in their power to trade down, to pick up a premium pick, drop down to a 6, 7, 8 spot. Because at that point, they still can get, in my mind, likely either Chase Smith or Jalen Waddle, who would fill a major need for that one big-time playmaker in their wide receiver core. So if you're going to ask me between those two, I think Jamar Chase fits more the mold. I do, however, wonder how much of an issue it's going to be to them. And based on everything that you can take from how they run their program and their philosophy, I think the fact that Jamar Chase didn't play in 2020 might be some cause for concern. Then again, though, there are other guys who have been mocked to them who fit in the same category, and I'm talking about Penei Sewell, didn't play in 2020. Micah Parsons also didn't play in 2020. I think ideally the Dolphins would prefer having somebody who played last year. Whether that's enough to sway them away from a potential pick, that I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. You mentioned Jalen Waddle. I feel like he's a guy, you talk about the height, weight, speed element. I mean, just in terms of elite traits, I mean, Jalen Waddle has elite traits. I kind of wonder how he would factor in when we talk about Jamar Chase versus Devante. What about Devante versus Jalen Waddle and how those two, it's a really, really interesting discussion when it comes to that team.
No question. And it might become, what do you prefer? And how big is your concern about Devante Smith? A, durability in the NFL, B, his ability to get off the line of scrimmage if opposing defenses decide to stick a guy in his face right at the line. And I understand that the notion that, hey, college teams tried to do that, it didn't work. Well, the NFL is a different animal.
Yep. Okay, we've seen that time and time again. So I will ask you this now. We've talked about a bunch of guys. Is there anybody else that you're like, all right, this guy makes a lot of sense, or the inverse, hey, this guy doesn't make a lot of sense for this Miami Dolphins team?
Here's the thing: the Dolphins have 3-18. Are we focusing strictly on 3 right now?
Let's talk. I think we could talk both, because I think it's interesting. And we obviously look, they have the 18th pick. That's a big pick.
It is a big pick.
What do you think makes sense there when you talk about 18?
That's a good one. To me, I think, especially if they go offense with the number 3 pick or 7 or 8, whatever they wind up doing, I think this notion that the defense is there because they were 6th in the NFL in points allowed last year, I don't think that's quite on the ball. I mean, they were 20th in terms of yards allowed. They were able to keep the points down because they were able to come up with the timely turnovers. But is that something that's sustainable year after year after year? I'm not sure. I don't think you could call the Dolphin defense dominant last year, and it was exposed in certain games. For example, they had no answers for KC. They had no answers for Buffalo. Of course, a lot of defenses didn't have answers for those two teams.
Right.
But the fact remains, if you want to be a championship caliber defense, you have to be able to do better than the Dolphins did over there. So I do think very possibly a defensive player could be in play at number 18, whether it be Micah Parsons if he falls all the way down there. I like Zaven Collins an awful lot. I don't know if 18 might be a little bit too rich for my taste at 18 or for the Dolphins' taste. I don't know that he's been tapped to go quite that high, but he's somebody who's got the kind of traits that you like. JOK from Notre Dame is another very, very intriguing guy, particularly if you remember what Brian Flores wanted to do with Minkah Fitzpatrick in 2019 before Minkah balked and the whole thing went sideways to the point where they wound up trading him. Well, he wanted to use Minkah as a type of guy that they could plug in a whole lot of different places in the back end. That's kind of what JOK is.
Yep, no doubt.
So he's been mocked quite a bit to the Dolphins, and I certainly could see him being a fit there and Flores using him in the role he wanted to use Minkah in.
And I feel like if you're talking about the Zaven Collins versus JOK, Owusu Cornwell coming from that big school, we talked about the big school element of it. That might be enough to tip the scales there. Running back, late in round, do you feel like that's a team that would take a first round running back?
No.
Interesting.
No, not at all. And I see Najee Harris being mocked to the Dolphins at 18. I don't see it. Again, I'm going to go back to the New England blueprint, because let's not kid ourselves. That's what the Dolphins have been following.
Yep.
They don't necessarily like to call themselves Patriots South, but that's kind of what they've been doing. And the model in New England, been running back by committee for the most part. They did take Sony Michel in the first round one time, I believe. He might have been 31st pick or something. I believe it was very, very late in the first round.
Yep.
I don't think it's necessarily a wise allocation of assets, because you can get a guy in the second round who might be not quite Najee Harris. But for example, if Javonte Williams is there at 36 or 50, I think he fits the bill, and then you can devote your resources at 18 on somebody else.
Yep. It's a really fun team to be able to study, and you've got a decent sample size to be able to work with. Alan, thanks so much for joining us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Talk about Chris Grier, Brian Flores, and the Miami Dolphins. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, right back at you, and hope we get to do this in person next year.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
Well, hope you guys enjoyed that segment there with Alan, who does great work covering the Miami Dolphins. So let's get into our draft mailbag. And once again, the best way to throw us your support. If you love this show, if you listen every single week, I would love it if you could just go on, throw us your support. Just say thank you by jumping on, leaving a rating, leaving a comment. And by the way, this comment, I believe, is the last one in the queue. So if you jump on the Apple Podcast right now and leave a question or a mock draft, whatever it is, we'll get to it on the very next show. So we're going to hit on this one. It's Valhalla24. Laid out a few teams here. Said the Las Vegas Raiders, Denver Broncos, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, Minnesota Vikings, 49ers, and he laid all those teams out with the records from 19 and then the records from 2020. And he said, what do all these teams have in common? Outside of the losing records from all their records got worse, but he said all of those teams drafted a wide receiver in the first round last year. I understand that there are a lot of outside factors with those teams, but why do people keep saying that the Eagles and other squads should draft another wide receiver when wide receivers do not equal wins? And Val, that's a great question. And so it's a really interesting debate. And really smart people on both sides would argue either way on that. You could look at it and say, hey, look, you look around at some of the top receivers in the NFL. You can find guys on day two. You can go and find players that can make impacts. But then you also look at who the elites are at the position. There are a lot of guys that ended up going in the first round, right? I mean, if you look at, certainly DeAndre Hopkins, you look at Julio Jones, you look at a bunch of those players, they ended up going on round one. So I think ultimately, look, it's as you mentioned, there are a lot of outside factors, and this is kind of a weird year in that we saw so many teams use a first-round pick on receiver a year ago in what was universally accepted to be an outstanding draft class for wide receivers. And then you look here at this one and you say, all right, well, this is also another really good season to have to want a receiver. So look, when you look at the top players, and I already mentioned, you look at Julio Jones, you look at DeAndre Hopkins, you look at Mike Evans, right? A lot of these guys were going in round one. Odell Beckham Jr., right? These guys were first-round draft picks. Then you had some guys that fell to day two. You had DK Metcalf and, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen. Those guys fell to the second day. And then some guys, fell into the third day of the draft as well. Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. You can go down the list. There's guys that are selected up and down the draft board at the wide receiver position. So look, number one, it's a passing league, right? You have to score points to be able to have sustained success in today's NFL. And so the best way to do that, through the passing game, try and find as many pass-catching weapons as possible. And I say pass-catching weapons because I'll throw in the elite tight ends into that discussion as well. We've talked about that in regards to Kyle Pitts. But I think when you look at the top receivers every year in the draft, to me, if you're talking about a guy in the first round, he has got to be the kind of player where you're looking at him and saying, not only can he be the top pass-catching target for most teams in the NFL, but he's going to be elite in a couple of areas, right? So he's going to have outstanding athleticism and or speed. He's going to have outstanding size. He's going to have outstanding hands and ball skills, separation skill, and then competitiveness. You've got to be elite in a couple of those areas. If you're not, well, then we can find that guy a little bit later in the draft. If you start making exceptions at a lot of those different areas and say, oh, well, he's solid here, he's solid there, he's solid there, you're not going to reach that level where you're going to say, oh, well, this guy was worth taking in round 1, right? If the Kansas City Chiefs, they got Tyreek Hill in round 5, or if you want to look at the Allen Robinson for the Chicago Bears, previously for the Jacksonville Jaguars, they got him in round 2. Adam Thielen in Minnesota, right? When you look at those guys, they were acquired later in the draft than round 1, which is fine. You could say, oh, well, we can wait on those guys, but if we went back to the time machine and say, hey, Allen Robinson is going to be one of the best receivers in the NFL, he would have been a first-round pick. And no one would blink an eye that he would have been worth that first-round selection, right? Because he is one of the best receivers in the NFL. So it's a really fun discussion, and it's one that you could, again, there's good arguments on both sides. To me, it comes down to every single team scenario, how they're going to use these receivers, what that offense already looks like in terms of the weapons that they already have available. And you have to also keep in mind, at wide receiver, it's not about year 1 because I know guys will come in. You're seeing more guys now that can come in and produce, but time and time again, we have seen that you have to give those guys, especially at wide receiver, year 2, year 3 especially. That's always the big year for wide receivers, is looking what they're able to do in their 3rd year in the league. Let this kind of develop. Let this play out a little bit before we say, oh, all those teams that took a first-round receiver in 2019 or in 2020, they made a huge mistake. So it's a great conversation. And Val, I'm so glad that you brought it up because it's a really fun one. And one that, look, I'm telling you, everybody's having that conversation around the NFL. There are conversations in every building having those conversations, having those arguments about wide receiver value, whether it's free agency or in the NFL draft. But no one will argue the importance of a wide receiver in their offense and the structure of how they do things in the passing game. So good stuff this week. Great question there from Val, but also great stuff from Alain Poupart. Great stuff from Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We're going to be back here in a couple days. We've got a great segment lined up with Greg Cosell. We'll have another mock draft with Ben. We've got another great guest to join us here later this week, all on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later this week.
In just over 3 years, Eagle's Autism Foundation has raised millions of dollars for autism research and care. But this is about so much more than just fundraising. This is about making a transformational difference in the lives of those affected by autism. This is about bringing our community together. With inclusive, sensory-friendly events and accessible resources, we meet families where they need us most and where we can serve them best. Together, we're united in our mission to improve the lives of the autism community and to turn awareness into action. It's what we focus on every day in every way.